kind of a thought for the day that might or might not tie into the message, depending on where the message takes us. This is from a book I read recently called Bozo Sapiens. It's one of those random books I always walked around it's a great title. And the title called, it was in the reject pile at half price. And it's one of these books that's like a random find that's a real gem, and I don't know why we didn't hear more about it. Michael and Ellen Kaplan, it's a mother and son team that wrote the book. And it's kind of a different take on evolutionary psychology, and this is just a quote that struck me from that book, which I thought I might like to share today. While we keep the same body through a lifetime, and essentially the same genes throughout all our history, the real evolution takes place outside in culture. The distinction of nature from nurture is not useful. Our nature is to be socially engaged. I like that a lot, because you still hear like the nature-nurture debate going on all the time, even in just daily conversation, people get into it. It's like, no, our nature is to be social, it's to be socially engaged, to be interested, and to be active in pursuit of anything. We are not condemned to live as our physical mechanisms dictate. In the history of a people, as in the lifetime of an individual, we welcome the chance to reshape our circumstances and our expectations. That is what culture is for. Naked or clothed, jungle or city dweller, under all skies, in all weathers, we are happiest when questing in company. I love that. And this is a good company to be questing with this morning. I think one of the things we do as human beings, one of the things we do all the time as human beings, and it's also something that is one of the least productive things we do, is comparing. Comparing people, comparing groups, comparing us especially to other people. We're obsessed with rankings. I think one reason I was forgetful this morning is I have a little bit of PTSD going on because my alma mater lost to Notre Dame last night. So now we're going to drop out of the rankings. So I guess I can be relieved of looking at rankings for the next few months, probably the rest of the season. But then, U.S. News and World Report has their annual college rankings, hospital rankings. As someone who used to be on the board of a small regional college, I can tell you college boards, Board of Regents, are obsessed with the U.S. News and World Report rankings. It's a very big deal. J.D. Powers. I mean, we're all about this hierarchical thinking, aren't we? We kind of tend to think hierarchically. We're obsessed with trying to figure out who the top dog is, or more precisely, more accurately, I guess, the top 8. The next time you meet somebody who doubts evolution, I challenge and ask them, have you ever attended a convention? And if you go to any convention, you're going to see male dominance hierarchies in action. And you see this in your office, you see male dominance hierarchies in your office, I'm sure. I'm always amazed how when you go to the zoo, people are at the primate exhibit and they're watching the gorillas and the chimps and they're doing their gorilla things, and when they start showing facial expressions or playing or throwing stuff, people will say, ooh, they're delighted by this human-like behavior, right? And they'll say, ooh, they're so much like us. So you always hear that at the primate exhibit. No, actually it's backwards. They're not so much like us, we're so much like them. Our obsession with hierarchies, dominance hierarchies, extends to some of the smallest things. I try to go to the gym. At the gym they have the long lines of elliptical trainers and the treadmill machines and all that. And so I'm on my elliptical machine the other day, and there's a guy next to me, and I kind of look over, and he's like, because they have like these little metric screens on your personal machine that tells like how many calories you're burning and how rigorous your workout is, and you punch in your weight and your age and all that kind of stuff. Well, this dude's like looking at my screen, you know? and then he caught me looking at him looking at my screen. He's like this, you know? So now I've been watching, and people really do this. They're like looking at the other screen, you know? And I've even seen a few people, mostly women actually, I don't know what's behind that, they'll put their towel over the whole thing. It's like, you know, mind your own business. You know, you're not looking at my screen, you know? So, am I right? I see Natalie, am I right? People do that. Yeah. She's a trainer. Trainers are another one of those guilt-inducing professions, you know? It's kind of like when you see your dentist and you think about flossing, you know? It's like, I'll go to the gym today, later. A few years ago, I had a neighbor of mine who, he and I used to go weight fishing out in Galveston Bay from time to time. It was always so much fun when the flounder were running in November and, you know, max out. And he actually went more fishing more often than I did. I went out to my house one day to pick up my newspaper, and I saw a boat in his driveway. And so I walked over, and it's like, man, what's the deal with the boat? And he said, well, I got a fishing boat. And so I congratulated him. It's awesome, way to go, you know, and I meant it. But at the same time I was congratulating him on the fishing boat, there was a little voice deep down inside me somewhere that was saying, gee, must be nice. Wish I had a boat. Are you going to take me on your boat? You know, and we, you know, if I weren't raising two kids like you, I could probably afford a boat. And we get these little nasty thoughts, don't we? Even, you know, that we struggle with. And a few months later, so he had his boat, and I got out on it once, and that was fun. But he had the boat at a storage facility. Then a few months later, about 3 months later, I saw the boat in the driveway again one morning. I was walking my dog, walked by the boat, there's a big for sale sign on it. And I'm like, dude, what's up with the boat? Because, it was a total pain. I mean, just maintenance all the time, too expensive. I just can't deal with it. I'm getting rid of it. And there was that nasty little voice inside that said, ha, I'm so glad I don't have a boat. Now, I know I'm not the only human being that has these emotions, because the German language has a word specifically for this little twinge of delight that we sometimes feel at the misfortune of others. And it is Schadenfreude. Yeah, we know that. Great word. And there are probably several evolutionary reasons why Schadenfreude developed, and we don't have to get into them now. I think it'd be fun to speculate. Probably don't have time to talk about it. But we did evolve to be a competitive, comparing species. But there are aspects of that I think have outlived their usefulness, and aspects of it that bring us a lot of grief and are unnecessary. One reason comparing ourselves to other people is so totally unnecessary is your absolute uniqueness. Unless you're identical twin, nobody has your exact DNA, right? And even if you are an identical twin, even identical twins aren't identical. My younger brothers are identical twins. And they're two radically, you know, different human beings, because we know that genetics is only part of it. It's not just genetics plays a big role in who we are and in our behavior, but it's also how our genetics have interacted with our environment, and getting back to that quote, with culture, that makes us uniquely who we are. So even identical twins raised in the same household technically don't have an identical upbringing. What factors might be there?
What's the other guy?
One, yeah. I mean, why not? You're raised by the same parents, same household, but you still end up with radically different human beings. Well, they have different circles of friends. Sometimes they have different teachers in school, and even the parents are going to treat them differently. Identical twins are, nobody is ever treated identically by their parents. And so all these things pile up. And I mean, just the point is, we're just so radically, utterly unique that nobody else on this planet has your unique history, combination of life experiences and DNA. And so, yeah, like last week, Jared told us this amazing story about growing up in the wilds of Alaska, like it was out of some book. Have you written a book yet? Are you thinking about it? That would be an awesome book. And there again, I had like the reverse Schadenfreude effect. Like, oh man, he's such a, he didn't grow up in Baltimore, you know, and it was really cool. But, you know, he's got this unique story. You know, Ken's got this unique story of, I mean, Ken emailed me from Terlingua earlier last week. And like, that is so cool, man. You're getting to hang out in Terlingua, you know, and then you're going to be here. He's been all over the world this week. And, you know, but that's it. Everybody's story is just so absolutely radically unique. You can't compare. There's just no rational basis. There's this guy in my morning coffee clutch at Starbucks named Bill. Not actually, his fake name. But I'm not breaking confidence because he says everything he says at the table, he says loudly for the whole world to hear. So I'm not breaking confidence. But he's 66, 67, and one of the themes of his conversation that comes up from time to time is how when he was a young man, he made a lot of bad mistakes, did a lot of really stupid things. And he keeps saying he regrets, you know, I just wish I listened to my old man. He had so much wisdom. Wish I had listened to him. And if I'd only listened to him, I wouldn't have had so much grief, caused so much pain for so many people. And one day I said, look, Bill, it's not your fault. The last part of the human brain to develop, as many of us know, is the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functioning part of the brain that makes your rational decisions. And in our species, it doesn't mature until you're in your 20s. For some guys, not until 25 or even 30. Or 40. You need to process about that later. Women, much earlier, which is why if you have any young drivers in the household, you pay horrendous car insurance rates for young women until they hit 21. For guys, that horrendous car insurance rate doesn't begin to drop off until 25. So it's statistically, I mean, the actuarial scientists know that, which basically means you do dumb stuff. And you don't know why you do that. This explains teenage boys. It explains us feelings of invincibility and making horrible, ridiculous decisions. Because you can't. It ain't there. You don't have the capability of it. And so I told them the other day, don't beat yourself up for not having listened to your dad, because you couldn't. But you're listening to him now, because now you can. Even though he's deceased, now those words are still there. Well, anyway, I'm lost now. What was I going to talk about? This unique. So we got this unique life trajectory thing going on. I mean, there again, just absolutely, you can't, I think sometimes we make these arbitrary goals, like by such and such an age, I want to be so far in my career, or I want to be making so much money, or I need to be married by such and such an age. And you really, I mean, yeah, setting some goals I think is probably a good idea, but there's so much we don't have control over. And sometimes you just have to go with the flow. Recently read, and actually, I love the Einstein's violin. Actually, it's also one of my favorite songs that Ken does, but made me think of this reading. I've been doing a little bit of reading and creativity, and there's a guy at the University of Chicago named David Galenson. He's actually an economist, but he's been doing some research into the topic of creativity. And he found out that there are roughly two broad categories of genius. There's something that he calls conceptual genius, what we associate with child prodigies. Like Mozart writing an opera at the age of 12 or whatever ridiculous age he was when he did that stuff. The people just burst out on the world and do something great very young. But then he said there's another broad category of creativity which he called experimental creativity, an experimental genius. And that tends to emerge later in life and is the result of years and years and years of tough life lessons, of maturing, of the frontal cortex getting mature, and trial and error. And he gives examples. One example I found interesting was Picasso and Cézanne, two famous painters, obviously. And When Picasso painted the first painting that was considered a masterpiece, he was only 20 years old. But today, and then Cezanne, his first masterpiece wasn't painted until much later in life. Today, the stuff from early in Picasso's career is valued at 4 to 5 times as much as the stuff that he did later in his career. With Cezanne, it's exactly opposite. It's stuff he did in his mid-60s that's valued like 15 times more than what he did when he was a younger guy. Two incredibly talented, gifted, creative people, but, and we have budding genius in the back of the room. Yeah. And, but anyway, two incredibly talented, gifted artists, but their trajectory was Orson Welles. Like, how old was he when he did Citizen Kane? Like early, he peaked at 25 as a director. Hitchcock, however, did Psycho and Rear Window and North by Northwest and all his other great pieces between his 54th and 61st birthdays. That's when he peaked. So this explains a lot. I'm just waiting to peak. I like this. Mark Twain revised Huckleberry Finn so many times and gave up on it so many times. It took him nearly a decade to finish Huckleberry Finn. I never knew that until the other day. It's not a long book. Oh, and he published it when he was 49. So I think sometimes even those of us who don't believe in a final judgment, oh darn, I forgot to do your thing, Natalie. We'll do that later. We'll do it next. How's that? Okay. I told you I'm forgetful today. I'm going to stop watching Michigan football the rest of the fall. Even those of us who don't believe in a final judgment or anything like that, but somewhere in the back of our head there's this nagging sense that there is this report card in life that's someday going to be bestowed on us, some kind of final scorecard, even if it's only an obit in the newspaper. And I think sometimes we have this image, I don't know, like we're gonna, finish out our life, sit contentedly in the retirement home, look back on the things we've achieved, and think that on the balance, our life has been a positive thing for the world. Like there's this, yeah, we messed up, but yeah, we've done a lot of good things, and there's like this, report card. But here's the deal: there's no report card. It's a myth, because there is no way you could ever measure the significance of any given life. There's no way any of us will ever know the true extent of the impact our lives have had on the world. That's not a bad thing, that's just a statement of fact. It's like, we don't know the lives we've touched. We don't know the good we've done. The algorithm needed to figure out something that could not be written, at least not right now, because there's too many variables. We have a culture that tends to lift up great lives. Like we lift up our cultural heroes, people to admire, who did great things for the world. A prototypical example, Winston Churchill, right? All politicians claim to admire Winston Churchill. Stood up to the Nazis, saved Britain during the Blitz and everything else. Well, that's true. He did a lot of great stuff. But Winston Churchill also, if you know anything about his life, brutally and violently repressed any attempt to threaten British rule anywhere in the British colonial empire. He authorized some brutal, put downs of rebellions. From Africa to South Asia. And look, I'm not knocking Churchill. I'm just trying to make the point that any human life, even the so-called greatest lives, they're a mixed bag. And we honestly can't tell where our biggest impact will be. I was sitting in a traffic jam on I-45, which I guess is kind of a redundant phrase, a while back. It was worse than ever. The thousands of vehicles slowed to a crawl. And so I'm just kind of sitting there and start thinking about all the people that are being made late for whatever it is they need to do right now. And so we finally start inching along, and I started picturing, maybe there's people on their way to medical appointments, maybe there's you know, a pregnant woman in one of these vehicles on her way to the hospital. I mean, someone needing to go pick up a kid from somewhere. I thought about all the thousands, and then the ripple effect of all the thousands and thousands of lives caused by this wreck. And then we finally get up to the wreck, and it wasn't, you know, thankfully it wasn't a major wreck. It didn't seem like there were injuries, but it was enough to bring everything to a dead stop. And we got up to the wreck, and there's a guy who was involved in, it looks like he might have been the guy who caused the wreck, and he's wearing a suit, and he's on his cell phone. And I'm thinking, okay, here's a guy who maybe in his life is, you know, maybe justifiably proud of his sales record, you know, or a product he's developed for his company or something like that. And he thinks that's where he's making his stamp in life. That's what we all like to think. We're making our stamp in our career or whatever. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if in terms of sheer impact on the world, the most significant thing he ever did was have a wreck? I mean, think about it. It might be. You know, it might not. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing, just reality. It's like, you know, the one time where he affected more lives than anything else he ever did in his life was the day he got in a wreck on I-45 and he didn't even know it. It's possible. Now, it sounds like a bummer, but it's not. Because I think the point is, because there's simply no way to ever comprehend to measure the significance of any given life, because there is no final report card, because there is no final exam hanging over us, we can relax a bit. If the wreck is the biggest thing you do in life, so what? Have a good time doing it. You know, I don't know, just enjoy, go along, go with the flow, because there's so much in the life, our unique life trajectory we can't control at all. You know, we can do our best to make the world a better place, but ultimately realize we have little control where everything is going. Now, I think the converse of the story of the guy on I-45 was a guy I see every day at the intersection of 1960 and 249. Basically, you learn everything about human nature by driving around Houston, can't you? I mean, there's a gentleman at that corner of 249 and 1960, very busy intersection, who sells the Houston Chronicle. And it looks like he's had a hard life. And, but he's out there every day, and without fail. And his shtick that he does is that he waves at the car. Every single car gets a wave. Now, when I first saw him, I was thinking, oh, because I get in those situations, I try to avoid eye contact, because if I make eye contact, I'm going to give him something, and, and so, at first the waving made me a little uncomfortable, and then from time to time I'd start buying the paper, even though I get the paper at home, because he's doing something worthwhile, so I'll buy the paper from him anyway. And then I realized after driving by this intersection for weeks, that he's okay if you buy the paper or don't buy the paper. He's all about the wave and the smile. And he waves at every car, and he smiles, and it's like a big wave, and it's not like, hey, come here and buy my newspaper. It's like a genuine good morning wave. And then, I've read these articles about how when we see a human person smile genuinely and give us a warm greeting, it releases these happy neurotransmitters, and it makes our day a little bit better. And I thought about every car that this guy greets every day. Everybody gets a wave, whether they wave back or not, it's okay. But they just get a wave and a smile. And thousands of people now, every day, their morning is just a little bit better because they have a few more happy neurotransmitters running in their system. So when they get to the office, they're maybe in a slightly better mood with their coworkers, unknowingly doing something just a little bit nicer, a little bit kinder, a little bit more gently because of the neurotransmitters released by the happy guy on the corner. And then there's a ripple effect. And I thought, maybe someday when peace breaks out in the Middle East and they finally develop the algorithm that accurately assesses the complex web of causation that is at work in our world, they might trace the peace in the Middle East to a dude standing on a corner in Houston waving at people. And he might be just one of the most important people in the world. do our community moment.
Right.
And then I'll let her introduce the money thing, and then Ken will come up and do another song for us.
All right, so usually we have our community moment before Mike because no one really wants to follow Mike. Like, oh my gosh. So when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, I was thinking about, we give you this 5 minutes of sharing. And I was thinking personal training, exercise, fitness. You guys would learn how to get great abs in 5 minutes. And I was like, but I'll save that one for another time. So what I decided to talk about was just how I got here. How I came to know so many important people in my life, and just my little journey. And again, Houston Oasis is open for everybody, wherever you are in your life, whatever you believe, but this is just my personal beliefs and how I got here. So my name's Natalie Newton. I just want to talk about how I got to know Mike Gauss and came into Houston Oasis. Like some of you, I was raised a Christian. My family attended a Lutheran church. But I frequently doubted the things I was told to believe during the time I was in the church. Hey! And of course, what is church? Community, family, children, right? When I was confirmed at 13 years old, my confirmation verse was John 20:29. Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Oh, did I hold on to that verse. When you do confirmation frequently, you get to choose your verse. It was no surprise that I picked Doubting Thomas. So time passed. I married a Christian man, and we had 2 beautiful children. During that time, I continued to doubt my faith. I fought to stay in the church, and I fought to believe in what the pastor told me and what was discussed in my Bible class. I was told by a pastor, "Natalie, you doubt because God loves you more than the others. You are an extra special warrior in his kingdom." And you know what? Satan knows it. That's why he's putting these thoughts in your mind. He's trying to take you from God's call. Talk about confusing. I eventually found myself exploring and dabbling in the Pentecostal faith and attending a Pentecostal church for a short time. And recently, just for kicks, I spoke in tongues for my boyfriend, just to see if I could still do it. It was fun. Anyway, back to my story. In my attempt to be a good Christian mother, and at least raise my children to be faithful and not struggle as their mother had, I was doing my best to indoctrinate them. One afternoon, while my 6-year-old daughter was eating lunch, I got out my audio Bible so we could listen to the Old Testament. It was our routine to do that for a few weeks during lunch. This day we were listening to the story of Lot. A 6-year-old and the story of Lot? Crazy, huh? Especially if you know anything about that story. So we were listening to it, and all of a sudden my daughter said, "Mom, I just don't believe any of this can be true." She was especially struggling with a woman being turned to salt. I walked over to the player, I turned it off, and I said, "You know what, honey? I don't either." I went over to the phone. I realized this was the beginning of my journey to reason. I called my sister. Both my sister and my brother weren't believers at this time, and I told her what happened. I told her that the thought of not having an afterlife wasn't so scary to me anymore. I mean, after all, 1965 wasn't so bad. Heck, I don't remember any of it. So eventually my family and I moved to Texas, and while I had accepted I no longer believed that Jesus was God's son, my husband at the time was a Christian and wanted us to join a church, especially for the children's sake. We needed a community, and of course I couldn't argue that point. We had just moved to the area, and that's what you do, right? You find a church. We visited Mike's church, and at that time I found it tolerable. Before we joined, however, I did request a meeting with Mike. And I told him, "I will join your church. I will get in front of the congregation. I will repeat the statement of faith for the sake of my family. But between you and me, I don't believe Jesus is God's son." Mike took a moment and said, "Natalie, you won't be the only one." I thought, what a relief. I can do this. Time passed. I continued to explore agnosticism, atheism, and humanism. I started doing some reading and finally came to stop believing in God when I read Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion. It was then that I left the church and began to look for a community, because we are a tribal species. I found HA through Meetup, met many good friends like Sergio and Heather Josue, Vic, so many people that I see here that have become such an important part of my life. I volunteered in the 2011 Texas Freethought Convention, where I crossed paths, yet again, with Mike House. We reconnected at the coffee shop, and Mike joked about our meeting at the convention being a bit of serendipity. We continued our renewed friendship with lunches with Vic, and dreamed dreams of a future where the communities we lived in would accept us, whether or not we chose to believe as they did. Where our children could be free to express their secularist viewpoints without being ridiculed, excluded, or bullied. I was so excited when Mike called me and told me of his and Gary's idea to plan to start Houston Oasis, a Freethought community grounded in reason, celebrating the human experience. I'd like to end today by quoting the guidelines we list on our website. At Houston Oasis, we think people are more important than beliefs. Only human hands can solve human problems. Reality is known through reason, not revelation. Meaning comes from making a difference. Labels are unimportant, and everyone should be accepted wherever they are, as long as they are accepting in turn. Thank you.
In the mirror of my mind, I see my father cast his line, silhouette in the rising sun. A single dancer in the light, a simple melody in flight. The song begins as the dance is done. Cast your trouble upon the water, let them flow into the sea. Live your life as if this morning was all the sunlight you'll ever see. Demons in the night, should I run or should I fight? Am I forgiven for the things I've done? Quiet thunder of the dawn, I know the memory and the song, Dad, and the ocean dancing as one. Cast your trouble upon the water, let them flow into the sea. Live your life as if this morning was all the sunlight you'll ever see. I find a peace I can't erase. Cast your trouble upon the water, and let them flow into the sea. Live your life as if this morning was all the sunlight you'll you'll ever see. That last song, by the way, I wrote part of for a film that was produced here in Houston about 15 years ago called Blue Days Lost Never Went Anywhere. Great opportunity for me to write and come across with songs that I just never would have written otherwise because it's theme specific to the film. And this next song was about the only song that got almost the entire song in the film. This film work is about filling very specific time with appropriate sound. And I just hope this makes you walk out of here like this. Got no money, got no car. I'm walking funny, but I ain't got far. Hey, Mr. Sunshine, save a little sun for me. Well, I lost my honey and I lost my pride. The weather's sunny, but it's cold inside. Hey, Mr. Sunshine, save a little sun for me. Don't let those raindrops fall down on me, 'cause when this pain stops, I'll set you free to go your own way. I got rocks in my pockets, holes in my shoes. You got me singing these hard love blues. Hey, Mr. Sunshine, save a little sun for me. Don't let those raindrops fall down on me, 'cause when this pain stops, I'll set you free to go your own way. I got rocks in my pockets, holes in my shoes. You got me singing these hard love blues. Hey, Mr. Sunshine, save a little sun for me. Hey, Mr. Sunshine, save a little sun.